The Mafia boss's father was lifting his glass when the waitress spoke. Not loudly, not bravely, like it slipped out by accident. One Sicilian greeting. The old man froze so hard the ice in his drink didn't even clink. His eyes locked on her face as if he'd seen her somewhere he wasn't supposed to remember. Around the table, men who never panic went still. Hands hovering near jackets, shoulders tightening, breath swallowed mid-chest. The sun turned first. Fast. Sharp. Not surprised like a customer. Suspicious like a hunter who just heard a forbidden signal. The waitress realized the mistake too late. You could see it in her throat, like she wanted to grab the words and shove them back inside. She tried to step away, but the old man didn't blink, didn't sip, didn't breathe. He simply set the glass down with a soft, final click and said, almost gently, "Say that again." And that's when she understood. In this room, a greeting isn't politeness. It's a password. And if she'd just spoken the wrong one, then every man at that table would start asking the same question. Who taught a shy waitress a word that scares killers? 2 hours earlier, the kitchen at Il Corvino sounded like a war zone disguised as fine dining. Pans snapped. Knives hammered boards. Tickets kept printing like the machine was angry. The air was thick with butter, garlic, and money, black truffle shavings, saffron risotto, veal stock reduced until it looked like lacquer. And over it all, the floor manager's voice cracked like a whip. Faster. Cleaner. If a plate leaves with a smear, you're done. The waitress, Elena, moved through it like she'd learned how to be made of smoke. She didn't argue. She didn't joke. She didn't even take up space. Hair pinned tight, uniform pressed, eyes lowered. Her whole strategy for surviving Manhattan was simple. Don't be noticed. Don't be remembered. She poured water, cleared crumbs, replaced cutlery before anyone could complain. The kind of work people only see when it goes wrong. Elena liked it that way, because attention in a place like this didn't feel like praise. Felt like a target. She was drying a row of crystal glasses when the manager stormed back from the front. Suddenly pale, suddenly quiet. And that's when she heard the name of the guests coming tonight. The manager, Marco, grabbed the clipboard like it was a life raft and looked down the line of staff as if he was counting survivors. Listen, he said, voice low now, the yelling gone. Nobody freelances tonight. Nobody has opinions. Nobody has a personality. Elena kept polishing her glass, eyes fixed on the stem, pretending her hands weren't starting to sweat. Marco swallowed. The Caruso family is coming. A few cooks stopped moving. Even the dishwasher paused, dripping suds onto the floor. Marco leaned in, as if the walls could repeat him. Private dining level. Full buyout. Cash and untraceable cards. They're bringing security. They're bringing their own sommelier. They're bringing their mood. He flipped a page. This table will spend more money tonight than most of us make in a year. And if anything goes wrong, if a fork is crooked, if a glass has lipstick, if you spill water on the wrong suit, there will be consequences that don't involve HR. He pointed like a judge handing down a sentence. Rule 1. Don't look at them first. Rule 2. Don't speak unless spoken to. Rule 3. If you are spoken to, you answer with yes, sir, and you keep it short. Rule 4. No apologies with excuses. No jokes. No small talk. Rule 5. You don't touch anyone, not even by accident. Someone tried to laugh it off. Marco didn't smile. Elena, he said, locking onto her. You especially. You're on water and bread only. You move, you pour, you disappear. Understand? Elena nodded, forcing her face blank. But the name Caruso hit her like heat from an open oven. Not fear, something older. Something buried. A memory of stone steps at dusk. A man's voice speaking softly in Sicilian when he thought no one was listening. Smoke in the air. A door slammed. Running feet. Elena's fingers tightened on the glass until it squeaked. She told herself what she always told herself. Asterisk, you're nobody. You're safe when you're nobody. Asterisk. And then the doors opened. The front doors didn't swing open like they did for normal guests. They parted. as if the building itself had decided it was smarter not to resist. Cold night air rolled into the foyer, followed by 4 men in dark suits moving with the calm coordination of trained animals. No rushing, no scanning like amateurs, just quick, practiced glances, corners, exits, reflections in the glass. Security first. Controlled violence. Their shoes made almost no sound on the marble, but everyone heard them anyway. Behind them came the son, Nico Caruso. He looked too young to carry that kind of weight, but the room made space for him like it understood. Tall, lean, perfectly dressed. Clean lines, expensive fabric, a face that belonged on a billboard if it weren't carved into something colder. His eyes didn't look, they assessed. He didn't glance at the staff to see who was nervous. He watched hands, pockets, angles, distance. He measured the world like it was a problem he could solve with one hard decision. Then came the father. Don Emilio Caruso moved slower, not because he was weak, because he didn't have to hurry for anyone. Silver hair slicked back, a heavy ring catching the light when he adjusted his cuff. A cane that looked less like support and more like a reminder. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. His face held the tired patience of a man who'd already survived every threat that could be whispered in his direction. Marco stepped forward and bent at the waist so far it was almost humiliating. Don Emilio, Mr. Caruso, welcome. Your private level is prepared. Don Emilio didn't answer right away. He let the silence sit there, thick and heavy, until it felt like the restaurant owed him something. Then he gave one small nod and started walking. As they passed, conversations died mid-sentence. A fork paused above a plate. A woman's laugh turned into a cough. Elena stood with the other staff near the wall, head lowered, breathing quietly. Disappear, she reminded herself. But halfway to the stairs, Nico slowed. He turned his head, just slightly, like an animal catching scent. And the son's eyes landed on her. Nico didn't stop because he was curious. He stopped because something bothered him. A waiter stepped forward too eagerly, smiling, shoulders back, trying to look important. The kind of guy who thought confidence could protect him. "Good evening, gentlemen," he said, voice bright. "My name is..." Nico lifted a hand, not loud, not dramatic, just final. "You'll be 10 feet away from my father," he said. "And you'll keep your cologne 20 feet away." The waiter blinked. "Excuse me? My father hates strong smells," Nico continued, calm as a surgeon. "And you reek like you're trying to hide fear under perfume." A couple diners pretended not to listen. Everyone listened. The waiter's smile cracked. I can wash. You can leave," Nico said. No anger, no raise of voice, just dismissal. The waiter backed away, face burning, and vanished into the kitchen like he'd been slapped. Marco's throat worked as he watched the disaster unfold. He needed a replacement immediately. Someone quiet, steady, invisible. His gaze snapped to Elena like a spotlight. "No," Elena mouthed without sound, panic tightening her chest. Marco grabbed her elbow anyway, steering her forward before she could step back. "You," he hissed through clenched teeth. "Water and bread. That's it. You don't speak. You don't breathe near them. You do your job and you come back down." Elena's hands went cold. Marco forced a smile at the Carusos. "This is Elena. She's discreet." Don Emilio looked at her the way you look at a chair before you sit, checking if it will hold. "Can she pour without shaking?" he asked, bored already. Elena swallowed. "Yes, sir." Don Emilio's eyes flicked once to her hands, then away. Decision made. Nico leaned closer, just enough that only she could hear him. "Don't improvise," he said softly. "Don't get brave. And don't make my father notice you." Elena nodded, because nodding was safer than speaking. Marco shoved a silver tray into her hands like he was handing her a sentence. "Go," he whispered. Elena turned toward the staircase to the private level, and she walked upstairs like she was walking to an execution. The private level overlooked the dining room like a balcony in a theater. Dim lights, thick curtains, a table dressed in white linen so crisp it looked ironed into place. Elena set down the bread basket with hands that didn't tremble until after she stepped back. 2 bodyguards stationed themselves at the corners, facing outward. Not protecting the table from the room. Protecting the room from the table. Don Emilio took the seat with the best sight line to the stairs and the window, like habit had trained him to never sit with his back to anything that could betray him. Nico remained standing for a moment, scanning the space again, then sat 1 chair off, close enough to shield, far enough to move. Elena poured water, silent. Sparkling first, then still. No drip, no clink. She kept her eyes low, but she listened the way quiet people learn to listen, like survival. "We're not pushing the docks this week," Nico said, voice controlled. "Too many eyes. Federal eyes. Let it cool." Don Emilio picked up his napkin with slow precision. "Cooling is what corpses do." "It's called timing," Nico replied. "We wait, we move clean, we keep the headlines empty." Don Emilio's mouth twitched. Not a smile, more like irritation. "You sound like a lawyer." "I sound like someone who wants our name to stay out of court," Nico said. The father's gaze lifted, heavy and sharp. "Our name is power. Power doesn't ask permission." Elena stepped in to replace a fork that was already perfectly aligned, just to have something to do with her hands. She felt the tension between them like heat off a stove. A son building a future. A father who only trusted the past. Nico's jaw tightened when his father spoke, but he didn't raise his voice. That was the strange part. The restraint wasn't kindness. It was calculation. Elena retreated into the shadow by the service door as the first course arrived. Plated like artwork, expensive enough to make people whisper. She held her breath without meaning to, because she could feel it, the moment coming when one small thing would tip the entire table from controlled to violent. Then the Don tasted the food. Don Emilio didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He took one slow bite, chewed like he was judging a sin, and then, without a hint of embarrassment, pressed the napkin to his mouth and spat the food out as if it offended him. The sound was small. The reaction wasn't. Nico's posture tightened. The guards didn't move, but Elena felt the room brace, like everyone had been trained for this exact moment. Don Emilio stared at the plate as if it had personally insulted his mother. "This," he said, tapping the edge of the porcelain with his fork, "is what you call Sicilian?" He looked out through the glass toward the glittering dining room below, as if the whole city was guilty. New York sells costumes, sells accents, sells imitation. He turned his gaze back to Elena. "And it serves fraud." Elena's throat closed. "Yes, sir," she managed, because anything else felt dangerous. Don Emilio's eyes narrowed. "Take it away, and tell your chef he should be ashamed. If he can't tell real ingredients from cheap tricks, he shouldn't be allowed near a knife." Elena reached for the plate automatically, but her hands hesitated, because she knew the truth. She had been in the kitchen when the box arrived. Unmarked, delivered by a man who didn't smile, signed for by Marco with shaking hands. She'd watched the chef open it like it was contraband. She'd seen the fruit inside. Dark-skinned, heavy, fragrant, nothing like supermarket citrus. She'd watched him taste it, nod once, and whisper something under his breath in a language Elena hadn't heard in years. This dish wasn't fake. It was the most authentic thing in the building. And if Elena carried Don Emilio's words back downstairs, the chef wouldn't just get yelled at. In a place like this, and with people like them, blame didn't stop at a write-up. Nico's eyes stayed on her, cool and expectant, like he was waiting to see what kind of person she was when pressure squeezed. Elena felt her pulse climbing. Her choice narrowed to 2 ugly doors. Correct the Don, or sacrifice the kitchen to protect herself. Correcting him could get her killed, but staying quiet would destroy someone else. Elena lifted the plate with both hands, but she didn't move yet. She stared at the smear of citrus on porcelain, bright, clean, sharp, nothing like the cheap, sugary stuff Don Emilio had just accused it of being. She'd watched the chef zest it himself, careful and almost reverent, like the ingredient mattered more than the ego at the table. Don Emilio's eyes narrowed. "Well," he said, like the word itself was a threat. Nico didn't speak. He just watched her the way he watched exits. Elena's pulse thudded in her throat. The smart move was simple. Nod, apologize, carry the blame upstairs and let the kitchen burn for it. But then she saw the chef in her mind. Hands scarred, pride stitched into every plate, getting punished for something that wasn't wrong. Elena took a quiet breath. "With respect, sir," she said, voice small but steady. "It isn't fake." The bodyguard at the corner shifted. Just a half step, just enough to remind her that the air had teeth. Don Emilio's expression darkened. "You're correcting me?" "I'm explaining," Elena said quickly. "The citrus is meant to bite. That's the point." And then it happened, the slip. Not planned, not brave, a reflex. A single Sicilian greeting left her mouth, soft and familiar, like she'd said it 1,000 times in a house that no longer existed. The private level went silent. No clink of glass, no chair creak, no breathing. Don Emilio froze as if someone had turned a key in his spine. His eyes widened, not with rage, but with something colder. Recognition. Nico's head snapped up. Instant. Predatory. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She heard the last syllable echo in her own ears and wanted to vanish inside it. She started, then stopped, because every word after that felt like stepping onto thin ice. Don Emilio leaned forward slightly. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" he asked quietly. Elena forced a shaky smile. "My grandmother," she lied. She was old-fashioned. Don Emilio didn't answer right away. He studied her like he was listening for a second voice under her voice. Then, slowly, he set his fork down. And Nico kept staring, no longer seeing a waitress at all. Seeing a message he didn't understand yet. Marco shoved a request slip into Elena's palm the second she stepped back into the service corridor. "They want a bottle from the cellar," he whispered, frantic. "Now. And don't talk about what happened up there. Just go." Elena didn't argue. The cellar meant distance. Stone walls. Quiet. 30 seconds where no one could stare. She hurried down the narrow stairs, past stacked cases and damp brick, until the restaurant noise thinned into a low hum. The air changed. Cooler, darker, smelling of cork and old wood. She found the bottle, cradled it against her chest, and let herself breathe. Only once. "Your grandmother," a voice said from the shadows. "That's your story?" Elena spun so fast her shoulder clipped the rack. The bottle nearly slipped. Nico Caruso stepped into the thin light, jacket open, sleeves rolled once. Like he'd stripped away the part of him meant for public and kept the part meant for truth. He didn't smile. But he wasn't angry either. That was worse. "You shouldn't be down here," Elena said, forcing her voice steady. "I own the air in this building if I want to," Nico replied and moved closer. He stopped just outside her reach, close enough that she could smell him, clean, expensive, controlled. Close enough that the cellar suddenly felt too small. "You didn't speak common Sicilian," he said quietly. "You spoke the old mountain tongue. Educated. Precise." Elena's mouth went dry. "I don't know what you mean." Nico's eyes flicked down, fast, taking inventory. "Your hands," he murmured. "No burn marks, no cracked knuckles. You work like someone who learned discipline before service." He reached toward her collar, and Elena's heart slammed. A thin chain caught the light, barely visible. Nico's fingers brushed near it. Elena reacted without thinking. Her palm snapped across his hand, sharp and loud in the stone room. Silence. Nico looked at his own hand like he was surprised it could be denied. Then he lifted his eyes to her, slowly, interest darkening the blue. "Again," he said softly, stepping in another inch. "Who are you really?" Before Elena could answer, footsteps pounded overhead. Marco's voice echoed down the stairs, shaky with urgency. "Elena, Mr. Caruso is asking for the wine. Right now." The interruption cut the moment like a knife, saving her for now. When Elena came back upstairs with the bottle, the private level felt different. Not louder, not calmer, sharper, like the air had been tightened. Nico was seated now, one arm draped over the chair as if relaxed, but his eyes tracked Elena's hands the entire time she approached. Don Emilio stared at the window beside the table, unfocused, as if he'd traveled somewhere far away and hadn't returned yet. Elena set the bottle down, reached for the corkscrew, and that's when she saw it. Down on the main floor, near the bar, a man in a cheap gray suit stood too still. He wasn't watching the room the way hungry people watched food. He was watching time. His chest looked wrong. Too square, too thick, like fabric stretched over something hard. Elena's stomach dropped. A vest. Then, across the street beyond the glass, high above the traffic lights, a flicker, so brief most people wouldn't register it as anything. A pinpoint flash. Not a camera. A lens catching light. Elena's thoughts didn't form into words. Her body moved first, the way it does when training lives deeper than fear. "Down!" she screamed. The bottle slipped from her grip and shattered on the floor, red wine exploding like a warning flare. Elena grabbed the nearest heavy service cart, iron frame, stacked with plates, and slammed it sideways in front of the window with everything she had. The next sound wasn't a gunshot. It was glass detonating. A bullet tore through the window space where Don Emilio's head had been a breath ago and punched into the cart with a violent metallic crack, sending ceramic shards flying like shrapnel. Chaos snapped awake. One guard tackled Don Emilio backward. Another drew his weapon so fast Elena barely saw the motion. Down the stairs, the man in the gray suit reached inside his jacket. He didn't get to finish. A bodyguard met him halfway, slamming him into the railing. Screams erupted below. Chairs scraped. People ran. Elena hit the floor behind the overturned cart, heart battering her ribs, wine and glass sticking to her palms. Nico's voice cut through the panic, cold and absolute. "Get my father out. Now." Then he turned, eyes wild, locked on Elena like she was the trigger instead of the warning. And Elena knew before anyone said it what came next. They weren't letting her walk away. Sirens didn't reach the private level. Not at first. Up here, the chaos had its own rules. Men with guns speaking in short commands, staff herded into corners, phones snatched out of hands before anyone could accidentally call the wrong number. Don Emilio sat hunched in his chair, breathing hard, a bodyguard pressed close like a shadow. His eyes kept drifting to the ruined window, then back to Elena, like he couldn't decide which one was the bigger problem. Elena tried to stand, but her knees didn't trust her yet. A thin cut on her palm stung where glass had kissed skin. "I saw it," she said quickly. "The reflection across the street. I just reacted." Nico didn't answer. He crouched in front of her, not to help her up, but to study her at eye level. His gaze moved over her like a scanner. Her posture, her breathing, the way she held herself even while shaking. "People don't just react like that," he said. Don Emilio's voice came out low and rough. "Either she saved me, or she knew it was coming." Elena's mouth opened. No sound came, because there was no perfect sentence in the world that could convince a man like him. Nico stood and extended his hand, not kindly, like an order. "Up," he said. Elena looked around for Marco, for the kitchen door, for anything familiar. The restaurant she worked in had turned into a crime scene that belonged to someone else. "I have to go," she whispered. "I have a shift, my bag." Nico's expression didn't change. "Your shift is over." Two guards appeared at her sides like they'd been waiting for that line. Elena felt one firm grip at her elbow, another at her shoulder. Not brutal, not gentle, certain. They didn't march her through the dining room. They took her through service corridors, past linen closets and locked doors, out a back exit into the alley where the air was colder and the night felt suddenly too wide. A black SUV waited with the engine running. The door opened. Elena hesitated for half a second, just long enough to feel what she was losing. Then Nico guided her inside. The door shut with a heavy, final sound, and Manhattan began to slide away behind tinted glass, while the road ahead led somewhere she couldn't talk her way out of. The SUV didn't feel like a car. It felt like a sealed room on wheels. Thick glass, heavy doors, the faint scent of leather and gun oil hiding under expensive cologne. The city lights smeared across the windows in long, blurred lines, like New York was trying to pretend it hadn't just watched someone almost die. Elena pressed herself against the door, hands clenched in her lap. Across from her, Nico sat still, phone in one hand, thumb moving in quick, precise taps. He didn't look at her while he sent messages, but Elena felt him watching anyway. Through reflections, through instinct, through that predator patience. Finally, the SUV left the bright main roads and turned onto a darker stretch lined with trees. The traffic noise faded. The streetlights thinned. A minute later, the gates appeared. Iron tall, crowned with spikes. Cameras mounted like insects. Floodlights washing the road in harsh white. A guard approached with a rifle slung casually, scanned the vehicle and waved them through. The gates opened with a mechanical groan that sounded like permission and warning at the same time. Beyond them was a private drive curving up toward a mansion of pale stone. Too big to be called a house, too quiet to be called a home. It sat back from the road like it had been built to survive siege, not weather. Elena's stomach rolled. She knew this place from rumor, from the way people avoided the name, from the way Marco's face had drained when he said Caruso. The SUV crunched to a stop on gravel. Doors opened instantly. Men appeared from nowhere, forming a corridor of bodies. Don Emilio stepped out from the lead vehicle with help. For the first time all night, he looked his age. Breathing heavy, jaw tight, eyes bright with fury that had nowhere to go. Nico exited next, smooth and controlled, then reached into Elena's space and took her arm. His grip wasn't crushing. It was ownership. Inside, the foyer swallowed sound. Marble floors, high ceilings, old paintings watching like witnesses. Staff in dark uniforms moved quickly, heads down, avoiding Elena's eyes as if her presence was contagious. Nico didn't give her time to look around. He guided her down a side hall away from the commotion, away from his father, away from anyone who might ask questions too loudly. "Come," he said, voice low. Elena's feet moved because they had no choice. Because whatever happened next wasn't happening in a restaurant anymore. It was happening in the heart of the family that could erase her with a phone call. Nico led Elena into a room that smelled like polished wood and restraint. An office, dark walls, a low fire burning behind a grate, shelves lined with books that looked more decorative than read. A heavy desk sat in the center like a judge's bench. He didn't offer comfort. He offered control. "Sit," Nico said. Elena sat because standing felt like defiance, and defiance felt like a short life. Her fingers kept worrying the cut on her palm, as if pain could keep her present. Nico didn't sit. He paced once, slow, then stopped with his back to the firelight. It put half his face in shadow. "In the car," he said. "I had someone pull your records." Elena's chest tightened. Nico picked up a tablet from the desk and tapped the screen with calm precision. No drama, no anger, like he was opening a file on bad weather. He turned it toward her. A name, a photo, her face. "Elena Maris," he read out loud, tasting it like he didn't believe it deserved to exist. "Born in Pennsylvania. Moved to New York 2 years ago. No criminal history. Clean." He swiped. Then another page. And another. The details kept getting cleaner, smoother, too perfect. Like a story someone had rehearsed. Nico's eyes lifted to hers. "It's a beautiful lie." Elena forced a swallow. "I don't know what you're." "No." He cut in, quiet and sharp. "The address leads to an empty building. The phone number was activated 3 months ago. Your employment history is a single line that appears and disappears depending on which database I check." He leaned forward and placed both hands on the desk, trapping her in his shadow. "And the worst part?" he murmured. "Your paper is better than your footprint. That means someone built you fast." Elena felt her heartbeat in her throat. Nico's voice dropped. "So tell me, before my father decides for us, who sent you?" Elena stared at the screen, at her own face inside a life that wasn't hers. And she understood, with cold clarity, that lying again wouldn't save her. Her only weapon left was the truth. Elena's mouth opened, then closed again. Because the truth wasn't a sentence. It was a door. And once she walked through it, there was no walking back. Slowly, she lifted her hand to her throat. Nico's eyes followed the motion instantly. Elena hooked 2 fingers under the thin chain she'd been hiding beneath her uniform and pulled it into the firelight. Something small and heavy slid out. A signet ring worn smooth with age, the metal darkened like it had lived through smoke. A crest was carved into it. Not a logo, not jewelry, a mark. Nico went still. For the first time since the restaurant, his control cracked just enough to show shock underneath. "I've seen that," he said, voice quieter than before. "That ring doesn't belong on a waitress. It doesn't belong on anyone anymore," Elena whispered. Her fingers tightened around the ring like it could anchor her. "My name isn't Elena Maris," she said. The words tasted strange, like a language she hadn't spoken in years. "That name is borrowed." Nico's jaw flexed. "Then what is it?" Elena inhaled, and the air shook on the way out. "My real name is Elena Bellandi." The room seemed to dim around them. Nico's eyes narrowed, searching his memory like he didn't want to find what he was about to find. "The Bellandi," he murmured. "That family is dead," Elena said, and the word came out flat, practiced. That's what everyone was told. A flash of the past slammed into her. Olive trees lit orange, not by sunset but by fire. The sound of boots on stone. Men shouting in the courtyard. Her mother's hand pushing her into a storage room that smelled like dust and wine barrels. And a voice calm, commanding, saying no witnesses. Elena blinked hard, forcing herself back into the office. "I was 12, she said. "I didn't win a fight. I didn't escape like a hero. I hid until the screaming stopped." Nico didn't move. His gaze dropped to the ring, then lifted to her eyes, like he was finally seeing the person behind the uniform. Before either of them could speak again, a heavy knock rattled the door, then another, and a voice from the hallway, older, rougher, full of authority that didn't ask permission. "Nico." Elena's blood turned cold, because she knew who it was. And then the father came in. The door opened without waiting for an answer. Don Emilio Caruso stepped in like the house belonged to his breath. He looked different out of the restaurant lighting, less polished, more raw. His suit jacket was gone. His shirt collar sat open like someone had grabbed him by it. One of his bodyguards hovered behind him, silent and alert. Don Emilio's eyes went straight to Elena. Not to her cut hand. Not to her waitress uniform. To her face. The kind of stare that doesn't search for emotion, only for information. "So," he said, voice gravel low, "this is where you put my surprises." Nico moved first, shifting subtly between them. Not a shield that screamed protection. More like a door quietly closing. "She saved you," Nico said. Don Emilio didn't blink. Lots of people save a man for the wrong reasons. His gaze slid to the chain in Elena's hand. The ring. A single flicker crossed his face. So fast Elena almost missed it. Not full recognition, but the sting of a memory. "Where did you get that?" Don Emilio asked. Elena's throat tightened. She let the ring drop back against her palm, hiding the crest with her fingers like it could disappear if she covered it. "It's a family," she managed. Don Emilio took one slow step closer. "Family is a dangerous word." He looked at Nico now, sharp as a blade. "And you," he said, "bring her into your office. Lock the door. Pour drinks. While my men are cleaning blood off marble." Nico's voice stayed level. "I'm verifying what she is." Don Emilio's eyes returned to Elena. "What you are," he corrected softly, "is too fast for a waitress. Too calm after a bullet. Too familiar with a tongue most people only hear at funerals." Elena forced her hands to stay still. Don Emilio's stare deepened, like he was trying to pull her name out of her teeth. "Tell me the truth," he said, "or I'll start guessing." The room held its breath, and just as Elena felt the next second might decide whether she lived, footsteps rushed down the hall. A man burst in, pale, carrying a phone like it was radioactive. "Boss," he said, voice tight, "we found something. About the hit." And the air in the room changed because this wasn't outside trouble anymore. This was inside. The man at the door wasn't one of the waitstaff. He wore a headset cord disappearing under his collar and the haunted look of someone who'd just read his own obituary. Nico took the phone from his hand without asking. His eyes scanned the screen once, then sharpened. Don Emilio held out his palm. "Give it." Nico hesitated for a fraction of a second, then handed it over. Elena watched Don Emilio read. At first, his face didn't change. Then the muscles around his mouth tightened, as if he was biting down on something bitter. "What is it?" Nico asked. Don Emilio lifted his gaze slowly. It wasn't a rival. The room went colder. The security man swallowed. "We pulled the dead shooter's device. The last outgoing instructions weren't coming from an outside number. They came from our encrypted channel." He tapped the screen, highlighting a string of authorizations. "Verified credentials," he added, voice shaking. "A trusted ID. Someone with clearance to open doors and move men." Nico's jaw set hard. "Name." The security man looked like he didn't want to speak it, like the word itself might get him punished. "Capo Luca Ferraro." Elena felt Nico go still. Not shock, something closer to rage held on a leash. Luca Ferraro wasn't an outsider. He wasn't a rumor. He was the kind of man who stood near Don Emilio at weddings and funerals. The kind of man who toasted family with a straight face. Don Emilio's voice dropped into something dangerous and quiet. "Where is he?" "Gone," the security man said. "He left the estate 10 minutes ago, said he was securing routes. But he also accessed finance protocols before he walked out. Wire activity is spiking. Fast." Nico's hand flexed like he wanted a gun, a throat, a solution. "He's not running," Nico said, almost to himself. "He's cashing out." Don Emilio stared at the screen again, and for the first time Elena saw it. Real fear, not for his body, but for the thing men like him loved more than comfort. Control. "If he drains the accounts," Don Emilio murmured, "we don't just lose money. We lose the empire," Nico finished. The security man's voice cracked. "There's more. He changed the vault sequence this morning. We tried the override codes." He shook his head. "We're locked out." And Elena understood the hook hiding inside the panic. Somewhere in this house, there was a door only the right mind could open. And they were running out of time. They didn't take Elena to a vault with gold bars. They took her to a screen. A secure terminal built into the wall behind Don Emilio's desk. Black glass, no keyboard, just a small reader pad and a blinking prompt that looked too simple to be dangerous. Nico's voice was tight. "Ferraro started the transfers already. We can slow them, but we can't cancel without the master phrase." Don Emilio stared at the prompt like it had personally betrayed him. On the screen, a single line appeared, Old Sicilian, not the clean textbook kind. The kind that swallowed letters and carried history in the throat. "Siu perdi a lingua, perdi a casa." Then beneath it, "Enter the keyword." Elena felt her stomach drop. Not because she didn't understand it, because she did. It wasn't a hacker's puzzle. It wasn't modern security. It was a saying, something whispered in kitchens and courtyards, something used by families who believed language was a weapon and identity was a lock. Nico looked at her. "You can read that." Elena didn't answer at first. She could feel Don Emilio's gaze like pressure on her skin, weighing every breath. "The system will hardlock if we miss again," Nico added, jaw clenched. "And Ferraro will be gone." Don Emilio's voice came out flat. "If you're lying, girl, you won't leave this room." Elena stepped closer to the terminal, hands steady in a way that didn't match her uniform. She read it again, quietly, like tasting the words. "If you lose your tongue, you lose your home." The key word wasn't a place. It wasn't a date. It wasn't a saint. It was the point of the proverb. Elena lifted her finger and typed one word, lingua. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the screen flashed red, then white, then unlocked into a web of accounts, routing maps, and active transfers. Nico exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "Stop everything. Now." Elena's fingers moved fast. She froze the outgoing wires, severed the authorization chain, and locked Ferraro's access out of the network like slamming a door on a hand. Done. The room fell silent again, different this time. Don Emilio stared at the terminal, then slowly turned to Elena. "That phrase," he said, voice low. "People don't just know it." And Elena realized she'd saved their empire. But she'd also just given the Don another reason to dig into who she really was. Don Emilio didn't thank Elena. Men like him didn't survive decades by handing out gratitude. He just stared, long enough for the silence to become its own interrogation, then reached out and shut the terminal with one firm tap, as if closing a coffin. "You stopped the bleeding," he said. "Good." Elena's throat tightened. She could feel the next part coming, because nothing in this house was ever just good. Don Emilio's gaze slid from the screen to her chain, to her face, to the calm in her posture that didn't belong to a server. "But now I need to know why you could do it," he continued, voice like stone dragged across stone. "Why you recognized the words. Why you moved tonight like someone trained for worse than busy service." Nico stepped forward before Elena could answer. "It wasn't romantic. It wasn't gentle. It was territorial. She's not a question you get to pull apart in front of your crew," Nico said quietly. "Not after what she did." Don Emilio's eyes narrowed. "You're protecting her." "I'm taking responsibility for her," Nico corrected, and the distinction mattered. "If she's a risk, it's my risk. If she's valuable, it's because I say so." For a moment, it looked like Don Emilio might explode. Then, unexpectedly, he gave a small, humorless exhale. "Not approval. Not surrender. Recognition. You're choosing your own pieces now," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. He turned to the security man at the door. "Lock the roads. Shut down the accounts again in 15 minutes. Make sure Ferraro can't reopen anything. Pull every camera from the restaurant to the highway." His voice rose just enough to wake the house. "Tonight, nobody sleeps. I want Ferraro found before sunrise." The security man nodded once and vanished. Don Emilio looked back at Elena, eyes dark. "If you're playing a game," he said, "you picked the worst table in the city." Nico's hand closed around Elena's wrist, firm, anchoring. "Come," he said under his breath. "Stay close. Don't give anyone a reason." And as they moved, Elena understood the new rule of her life. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was protected, which in this world was just another kind of danger. An hour ago, Elena was clearing crumbs and refilling water like she didn't exist. Now she was walking through a fortress full of armed men who suddenly knew her face. Men who would remember her voice, her speed, her nerve, and the way the Don had looked at her when she solved what his own people couldn't. Behind closed doors, the house had turned into a machine. Phones buzzing, orders flying, cars moving out in silence, names being spoken with the kind of hate that makes plans feel simple. Ferraro had betrayed the family. The hit had almost worked. And the only reason Don Emilio was still breathing was because a shy waitress had shouted one warning at the right second, and spoken one Sicilian greeting she never should have let slip. Nico didn't loosen his grip on her wrist until they reached the end of a hallway lined with portraits of men who looked like they'd never forgiven anyone. He stopped, finally, and lowered his voice. "You saved my father," he said. "You saved our money." His eyes searched hers like he was still trying to solve the same puzzle. "But you're not safe," he added. "Not from my enemies, and not from my family." Elena swallowed. "Then why are you keeping me here?" Nico's mouth tightened. Almost a smile, almost a threat. "Because if you're lying," he murmured, "I need you where I can see you." He leaned closer, close enough that Elena felt the heat of him without being touched. "And if you're not lying," he continued, "then someone will come for you the moment you walk out that door." Footsteps echoed somewhere below, men arming themselves for a hunt. The war wasn't starting tomorrow. It was already moving, and Elena, who'd spent years surviving by being unseen, was standing at the center of it, marked by a voice, a ring, and a greeting that sounded like a password. Because in the Caruso world, you don't get to save a king for free. You either become a weapon, or you become a hostage. If you want the next part, when Elena finds out what Ferraro really stole, and why that Sicilian greeting made Don Emilio go cold, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This story is just getting started.